The question is no longer just can Subaru save everyone. The question becomes, what does saving everyone actually do to Subaru? In Season 2 Part 1, Subaru is constantly chasing the perfect route, trying to make sure everyone survives, trying to make sure every mistake is corrected, believing that all suffering eventually pays off if the final outcome is the right one. But Season 2 Part 1 challenges that dream by showing that the pursuit of one ideal outcome can distort the very things that make people human. Through Echidna, Roswell, and Betty, Subaru is shown 3 of his possible futures. A future where trauma becomes information, a future where love becomes obsession, and a future where purpose becomes imprisonment. So Season 2 Part 1 is not just asking whether Subaru can reach the perfect route, it is asking whether reaching that perfect route is still worth it if the process slowly destroys the people chasing it. And that is why Season 2 Part 1 is genuinely peak. The first way Season 2 Part 1 challenges the idea of the perfect route is by showing how easily Subaru's trauma can be transformed into information. At this point, Return by Death is no longer just a curse Subaru is forced to carry. It is becoming a method he relies on, and that is what makes Season 2 Part 1 feel so much more disturbing than Season 1. Subaru starts treating death less like a tragedy and more like a tool. If something goes wrong, he can die. If he lacks information, he can die. If the current route fails, he can die and simply search for a better one. That is where the danger lies. Subaru's suffering is no longer just pain he has to endure. Death has somehow become useful, which is why Echidna is such a dangerous character. She did not create this mindset in Subaru. This way of thinking was already there. Return by Death has already started to change the way Subaru views his own life. But Echidna enables this mindset. She gives Subaru the comfort of finally feeling understood, and then uses that comfort to treat his trauma as something valuable to study. We see this danger almost immediately after Rem is erased. Subaru's first instinct is to end his own life and force a different outcome. On one hand, it proves how deeply he cares about Rem. She was the one who pulled him out of his lowest point in Season 1. She was the one who stayed with him even when he hated himself. So when she is put into a coma and everyone forgets her, even Ram, it makes sense that Subaru breaks. But on the other hand, the most disturbing part is how quickly he turns to death as the answer. He does not pause and think of death as the final dreaded outcome anymore. Death is the method, and that shows how much Return by Death has already damaged the way he thinks. Because Subaru's love for Rem is real, but the pursuit of the ideal outcome has distorted that love into self-destruction. He's not just trying to save someone, he believes that his own death is an acceptable price to save another person from theirs. Season 2 Part 1 is not just about whether or not Subaru can save Rem, it is about how far gone Subaru is, that death becomes the first solution he reaches for. And then Episode 8 takes it even further, when Subaru tells Echidna about Return by Death. I get it. At first, this moment honestly feels like relief for him. For so long, Subaru's trauma has been locked inside him. He has died, suffered, and reset over and over again, remembering all of it with not even a single person who could truly understand what he has gone through. So for the very first time, when someone listens, when Echidna listens, it almost feels comforting. Subaru finally gets to say the one thing he has never been allowed to say, but that very comfort is the trap, because Echidna does not respond to Subaru's trauma the way a normal person would. She is fascinated by it. She sees Return by Death as something incredible because of how much knowledge she could gain from it. Subaru's trauma becomes valuable because it gives her access to knowledge no one else could ever have. Echidna might have given Subaru the emotional release he so desperately needed, but she also encourages the exact mindset that made Subaru need that emotional release in the first place. To her, every death can teach him something. To her, every failed route becomes useful information for the next. To her, every bit of pain is simply another stepping stone on the path to the ideal outcome. That is where the idea of the perfect route becomes truly terrifying. Subaru's suffering becomes part of the strategy. Then episode 12 takes the idea even further with Subaru's second trial, one of the most devastating psychological attacks in season 2 part 1. It introduces the possibility that Subaru's failed timelines might actually continue after he dies, and that completely changes the emotional weight of Return by Death. Before this, Subaru could view his deaths as personal sacrifices. He might die, he might suffer, he might remember, but in the end, everyone else gets saved in the successful route. So in Subaru's mind, the pain is worth it because the final timeline is the only one that matters. But the second trial challenges that comfort. It suggests that every failed route might actually be him leaving behind his loved ones, leaving behind people who grieved him, people who needed him, people who had to keep living in a world without him. It exposes the real problem with the perfect route. Subaru's deaths are no longer his burden alone. His deaths might already be creating abandoned worlds full of grief, confusion, and trauma. So season 2 part 1 forces us to question whether chasing the ideal outcome is truly worth it. If every attempt leaves behind the same trauma Subaru is trying to save everyone from. Through Echidna, season 2 part 1 shows the first danger of chasing the perfect route. Trauma can become information. Subaru's pain starts becoming useful. His deaths start becoming strategic, and Echidna becomes especially dangerous because she validates that way of thinking. That is why the question is no longer just whether or not Subaru can reach the perfect route. The real question is what happens to Subaru's humanity when suffering becomes part of the strategy. Now, this is where Roswaal becomes very important and shows us the second danger of chasing the perfect route. If Echidna shows the first danger of trauma becoming information, Roswaal shows the second danger of love becoming obsession. Roswaal challenges the perfect route by showing Subaru what happens when love becomes so obsessed with one ideal future that everyone else is reduced to sacrificial lambs. It is this psychological warfare that makes Roswaal one of the most intriguing characters in season 2 part 1. Even before this season, he was always sus. From the moment he was introduced, he always felt like somebody who knew way more than he was letting on. But season 2 part 1 is where he stops that suspicious clown act completely and becomes an undeniable warning for Subaru. The scariest thing about Roswaal isn't only that he manipulates people, it is that his manipulation has actual logic behind it. He has a future that he wants, he has something he refuses to let go of, and because of that, he is willing to treat everyone else around him as pawns on a chessboard. He does not cause pain because he enjoys being cruel. He is cruel because he has convinced himself that it is a necessity, that if it leads to the future that he wants, then all the pain, trauma, and sacrifices are justified in the end. And that makes him a distorted possible future for Subaru. Because Subaru also has a future that he wants. He also has people and things that he loves dearly. He also believes that suffering can be endured if it leads to the ideal outcome. But it is Roswaal that shows us what that mindset looks like when it is already too far gone, when love has gotten out of hand, when devotion has decayed into possessiveness. And we start to see this from the moment Subaru and Emilia arrive at the sanctuary. The most dangerous thing about Roswaal is not that his obsession is chaotic, it is actually terrifyingly organized. By the time Subaru and Emilia meet Roswaal, the dire situation around them has already been shaped by Roswaal himself. He understands that Subaru's desperation to save the sanctuary, Emilia, and the mansion can be used to push Subaru towards the choice that Roswaal wants him to make. So not only is his manipulation logical, it is also terrifyingly quiet. Roswaal does not even need to directly attack Subaru because he has already designed the necessary conditions to trap him between impossible choices. That is a whole different kind of villainy. A lot of villains will try to break you by overpowering you. Elsa does it physically, but Roswaal does it psychologically by making Subaru feel as if there is no choice but to act according to the strategy Roswaal has laid out. The craziest thing is that Roswaal's obsession was not loud until now. There were always hints that something was wrong, but season 2 part 1 is where the mask really really starts slipping. And it makes him so dangerous because his devotion to the ideal future written in his book has turned into second nature manipulation. Episode 13 makes this lack of humanity impossible to ignore, because he is probably the most villainous thing this bastard Roswaal has ever done. He endlessly pushes Subaru towards the idea that he cannot save everyone. It is impossible. He has to focus on one ideal outcome, even if other people have to be sacrificed. It is either the sanctuary or the mansion. Roswaal wants so desperately for Subaru to accept that choosing one absolutely means abandoning the other. It is easy to say that Roswaal is simply opposing Subaru as the villain, but it's more than that. He is trying to shape Subaru into someone like himself. He wants Subaru to understand that true devotion means choosing one singular goal and letting everything else burn for the sake of it. And that is exactly where love becomes obsession. Roswaal is not only trying to win, he is trying to drag Subaru into his worldview. Love is supposed to will the good of the other, but Roswaal's love has become so obsessive that it is really all about himself. People are no longer people. They are variables to consider. They are pieces to move. They are sacrifices to be made. That is the exact danger Subaru is being warned about through Roswaal. Of course Subaru wants the perfect route because he wants to save the people he loves. But if he starts thinking like Roswaal, then saving one person can become an excuse to abandon everyone else. He is saying something Subaru is afraid might be true. Maybe he can't save everyone. Maybe love means choosing who matters most. That is why Roswaal is so dangerous. He is not just wrong, he is tempting Subaru with the darkest answer to his biggest fear. And Season 2 Part 1 portrays that idea in the most disgusting way, with the clearest example being Subaru and Amelia kissing for the very first time. It should have been something that had us jumping for joy. Their first kiss should have felt like a major step forward in their relationship, but instead, it happens in one of the most broken timelines. Subaru is literally dying. Amelia has lost her mind, and the moment is so tragic because it is nearly unrecognizable as love. That is why it is one of my favorite scenes in Season 2 Part 1 by far. On paper, Subaru and Amelia finally kiss, but emotionally, it's just wrong. It's disturbing, and it is undeniable proof of how dangerous Roswaal's worldview really is. If the perfect route requires people to be mentally destroyed, physically broken, and emotionally isolated, then can the perfect route really be called perfect just because the one ideal outcome was achieved? Roswaal makes love less about protecting people and more about forcing reality to match his obsession. And when love becomes that obsessive, well, it stops being love. It becomes possessive. Especially in Roswaal's case, it becomes a justification for cruelty. He makes it so clear that chasing one ideal future can distort love into something disgusting. That is why Roswaal is written so well as a warning for Subaru. Through Roswaal, Season 2 Part 1 shows the second danger of chasing the perfect route. Love can become obsession. Roswaal represents a possible future where Subaru's devotion decays into possessiveness, where saving one person or reaching that one ideal future becomes an excuse to sacrifice everyone and everything else. So he is not just Subaru's enemy, he is his warning. And that brings us to Betty. If Echidna shows the first danger of trauma becoming information, and Roswaal shows the second danger of love becoming obsession, Betty shows the third and final danger of chasing the perfect route. Purpose can become imprisonment. Betty challenges the perfect route by showing that purpose can become a prison when someone waits for meaning instead of choosing it for themselves. I have to say, first of all, Betty is yet another one of the best parts of Season 2 Part 1. When I first met her, I thought she was a typical tsundere. Pretty blunt, very strong-willed, and for a while she seemed like this endearingly stubborn character who just happened to be ridiculously powerful. But then Season 2 Part 1 came along and started changing how we saw her, and it is all because of that damn book. When Subaru's heart dropped, my heart dropped with him. Out of nowhere, she stopped being the tsundere librarian librarian we all know and love. To be fair, after everything Subaru went through with the witch cult, anything remotely similar to Betelgeuse's book is obviously going to feel villainous. So when we find out Betty was connected to a book like that, it makes us question everything. Was she always out to get Subaru? Is this yet another betrayal from someone who is part of our inner circle? Is she another Roswell? This is where the writing gets so good, because the more we learn, the more tragic Betty becomes. She is far from evil. She is trapped. Her life this entire time has been shaped by her book, by a promise, by the hope that a fateful someone would eventually arrive and give her existence meaning. That is why Betty is so important to this whole idea of the perfect route. She shows the passive version of this obsession. She is not active like Echidna or Roswell. She is not trying to force the world toward one future. She is frozen in place, waiting for that one future to arrive. And that makes her another possible future for Subaru, because Return by Death could also trap him inside a role. If everyone else's survival were to become his only goal, Subaru's own life would stop belonging to him. We see the early makings of that in episode 7, when Subaru first discovers Betty's connection to her book. But the tragedy is that the book is not evidence that Betty is controlling others like Roswell. It is evidence that the book is controlling her. For Betty, the book becomes the one thing she has attached her entire purpose to, the one thing she truly trusts, the one thing she expects to tell her what life is supposed to mean. She has spent so long waiting for meaning that she no longer knows how to live without the book. In that same episode, Betty and Subaru actually strengthen their connection when she saves him from the mansion. This should be a good thing, right? But no, for us it feels wrong, because Subaru did not want to be saved. He wanted to die and reset so that he could keep chasing the perfect route where everyone survives. And that creates such an important conflict. For Subaru, death has become a way to keep chasing that perfect route. Death has become the method. So when Betty interrupts his death, she is not just saving Subaru's life, she is interrupting the role Subaru is starting to force himself into. That is why his reaction is so disturbing. This man got angry because someone saved his life. That alone shows how decayed Subaru's mindset has become, how little value he's beginning to place on his own life, when his ideal outcome demands sacrifice. In Subaru's mind, his life is no longer the priority. The route is the priority. Saving everyone else is the priority. His own survival only matters if it helps him reach the correct future. That is where Betty and Subaru start to mirror each other. Both of them are trapped, but in completely different ways. Betty is trapped, waiting for someone else to give her life meaning. Subaru is trapped, sacrificing himself because he believes his life only has meaning if he can save everyone else. That is why Betty's writing in Season 2 Part 1 works so well. She is a warning about what happens when a role replaces an actual life. And by the end of Season 2 Part 1, that tragedy becomes even clearer. Betty's pain is not just loneliness, it is the fact that her entire life has been built on an empty promise. Her life effectively stopped when she was told that a fateful someone would eventually arrive and give her purpose. And after 400 years of waiting, that empty promise became a cage she could not bring herself to leave. She lived all this time, and yet emotionally, she barely moved at all. She was waiting for the script to give her the answer, but when it stopped giving her one, she did not know how to choose an answer for herself. This role has trapped her for so long that it has stopped feeling like purpose and started feeling like imprisonment. And this matters so much for Subaru, because if he lets Return by Death decide his path, if he lets Echidna validate his suffering, if he lets Roswell convince him that sacrifice is a necessity, then he risks becoming like Betty, someone with a role but no true life. Someone who exists for one outcome, someone who stops asking whether the future he is chasing is actually his. So through Betty, Season 2 Part 1 shows the third and final danger of chasing the perfect route. Purpose can become imprisonment. Betty represents the future, where Subaru stops choosing a life for himself and becomes trapped inside a role. She shows that living for one ideal outcome can become a cage when you stop asking whether that future is actually yours. So yeah, ReZero Season 2 Part 1 is where this series genuinely became peak for me, because this season does not just make Return by Death more painful, it makes it more dangerous. Through Echidna, Subaru's trauma starts becoming information. Through Roswell, Subaru's love gets twisted into obsession, and through Betty, Subaru's purpose becomes a cage he could spend his entire life trapped inside. That is what makes Season 2 Part 1 so much stronger than Season 1. It is not just about Subaru finding the perfect route where everyone survives. It is about questioning what that perfect route actually costs. Because saving everyone sounds heroic until suffering becomes a strategy. Love sounds selfless until it becomes possessive. Purpose sounds meaningful until it stops being chosen. That is why this season hit so hard. Season 2 Part 1 shows that the scariest part of chasing the perfect outcome is not failing to reach it. It is what you become while trying to get there. If you made it to the end, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you thought of ReZero Season 2 Part 1 in the comments section below. Also, it would mean a lot to me if you left a like, share this video with a friend, and subscribe for more ReZero videos like this.